Good morning, everyone. Here we are. It is day one of InfoSec World. Delighted to be here. And I am also delighted to be joined by Trace Woodbury. He is the CEO and co-founder of Ridge IT Cyber. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk about zero trust.
Most overused marketing term in the past 200 years.
Yeah, and I think we're going to spend the next 10 minutes kind of breaking that apart. So let us begin. So we, Cyber Risk Alliance, have done a lot of survey-based research around how companies are doing implementing zero trust. Challenge number one is organizations are going to vendors looking to see if they are a zero trust vendor. And I know you have some strong thoughts on this. There still seems to be that disconnect of seeing zero trust as a philosophy with a set of pillars as opposed to a product that you just pull out of the box. So talk about that.
Well, Forrester came out in 2009 with the Zero Trust Ideology white paper that came out. And while I love Forrester, it sat behind a paywall. And customers really didn't have access to it unless you belonged to Forrester. So we had all of these vendors that did have access and said, oh, well, I am Zero Trust. I am this piece. And so every consumer out there, business, et cetera, looking at it said, oh, well, I've bought Zero Trust. I bought this product. I'm all set now. And that's not what Zero Trust is. Zero Trust is an evolving thought process continuously. Things that existed a year ago didn't exist 5 years ago, and what's going to happen in 2 years doesn't exist today. We're seeing solutions that can really get extremely granular in a way we never imagined, but in a way that a small business can afford, or a commercial org versus only large enterprise. And how we can build that and say, hey, what can we work together? I think that being able to say, hey, I'm not buying one product, but I'm looking at a multitude of products, and how do I envision this coming together? But not so many products as what existed for 10 years ago. I've got 90 solutions, and I can't make sense of it all. So the breach has been here for 6 months. Like, how do I get that faster reaction time? I almost think in a way it was a disservice that Zero Trust came about, because it sounds great when you really know what you're talking about, but it's so hard to implement when you're listening to vendors all the time, versus having someone that says, all right, let's talk about your org, let's talk about your goals, let's talk about the types of data you have, because no two organizations are alike, so not every one vendor can fit in. God bless Microsoft, there's a lot of great they do, but if you listen to Microsoft, because they do so many things, well, this is all you need, but there's still shortfalls. Not all their products are amazing. And I think in a lot of ways it leaves the businesses more struggling to figure out what's that next piece and how does it come together.
So let's paint a picture. You are a CISO, a busy CISO. You have been dipping your toe in the zero trust waters. Now you're really trying to take the program to the next level, and there is no one-size-fits-all vendor, as you've just pointed out. Talk about today the steps, the things that a CISO needs to be thinking about when they're plotting what they need to buy, how they need to deploy it properly, how they need to optimize it properly, where all the pieces fit together, but also how to get started with what they already have.
Well, there's many questions that you asked there. I'm going to do my best to sort
I
of
do
remember
apologize,
them.
it's a loaded question.
I mean, I feel like there should be a whiteboard of knock these off in order. So I think the first step, as you pointed out, is do you analyze each of your tools and say, what can I make with good here? Do you take the approach of, I should be prepared to scrub everything and start over? Where does that exist? That could be very painful, but also might have benefits to both sides. But I really think the first step is actually the CISO working with the CEO and the COO and saying, here's what we're going to do, and our goal is actually to make the user experience better and not worse, but I need your buy-in to be able to tell the org, I'm going to do the same things everyone else is. I'm not going to be the one that says, yeah, but I get an exemption. We're all going to go forward on it. I'm not saying that Ridge IT has zero trust perfectly done for us and all those things, but every one of our devices has the same controls that we expect, and you go to use a different device and it doesn't do anything. You can't get anywhere because you don't meet minimum guidelines to how we've been able to go through, and we're still working through all that. But if our CEO wasn't on board of wherever the source are, we have problems. When we work with customers throughout the world to do deployments of different tools, when we have the CEO that's sending the emails out saying, we are doing this, I need you to work with us, not have different subgroups saying we're fighting this because, or I don't want this. One is streamlined and goes so much faster. The other one is a 2-year process of maybe it'll get implemented, maybe it won't. And those CISOs are the ones that are going crazy. You didn't actually hire me to do a job, you hired me to say we're trying something. And so I think that's actually the first step, is go make that presentation that says, I'll let you be involved, I want you to be involved, but how do we go forward on that? I think the next piece is the tools that existed 5-10 years ago have a chance of still being the right tools today, but a lot of those tools have come out with new features that need to be reevaluated and say, do I have all the right things, or did I buy the tool set from 10 years ago? I just kept hitting renewal on the invoice and I haven't actually implemented it properly, it's now out of date. One of my customers was a very early adopter into Zscaler 7 years ago. Well, they're using Zscaler functionality from 7 years ago, not Zscaler functionality of today. So it's a beautiful logo that you can tell everyone we use Zscaler, but realistically there's a whole bunch of blind spots that now exist. So just saying, do I have the tool? Maybe it needs a refresh on the tool that you have to say, hey, it's still the right thing. And Zscaler's done amazing stuff. Another friend that I work with is in vulnerability management, and they use McAfee. McAfee can be a great tool, but it also is one of those things, how do you properly get that implemented? How does it work? What does it need? And maybe your org has changed in a way that you need a whole new refresh of certain areas that you're doing. I also think is a CISO pick something, don't try and do every tool all at one time, like we're going to flip a switch from zero trust. Pick something that's of importance to you in that one pillar area and start there. In my opinion, identity access management should be that first thing you start on. But for each org, maybe it's something else. Hey, my IAM product's okay now, let's go work in this other area, we'll come back and beef up IAM later. But starting with that thought process of, I can slowly make the user experience better, but I can slowly shrink that perimeter of what can get in and how do things leave. I think the data pillar is the most overlooked pillar out there, because people don't have any clue where their data actually resides. They do these reports and come back and say, oh, I know where my data is, and you pick and say, well, BYOD devices, what data can be downloaded, what can exist there, and hey, if I use some of the cloud assessment tools now that are third party, just use an API, to what degree do you have S3 buckets sitting out there? To what degree do you have other things you didn't even know about? Hey, I didn't realize this server had RDP fully exposed. So people don't really understand that thought process. They're not stepping back and saying, vulnerabilities aren't just CVEs. Vulnerabilities are, what is my total attack surface?
Yeah.
So, long-winded response. I think I nailed most of what you asked.
You did a great job unpacking a very loaded question. So, well done. So, one of the things that when we survey security professionals comes up is the challenge of asset management. And there are some who would say that asset management within the realm of zero trust is maybe not broken, but not as fully baked as it should be. What are your thoughts on that?
So in the government space, easy to pick on because I can lay out their regulations, they must identify all the devices that are in their org and where are those devices and what do they look like. Well, if I'm only concerned about devices and not data, I'm missing the picture, because technically any device with my data is what's accurate. When you work in a closed network, well, it's really simple. I know that something can't join because it's not, approved to be in here, but so many environments are saying, hey, here's the bits and pieces that I've allowed for that access, but it still can be everywhere. So as we think about true zero trust, I don't trust any device. But wait a second, the CEO's phone is now holding that. That's not part of asset management. I don't know what CVEs or what other things exist on there. When I think about what CrowdStrike's doing is now exists, well, if I don't have CrowdStrike on every device, even though that's giving me a zero trust score, what's the point of it? If I look at solutions like Okta Together and CrowdStrike, I can now say, hey, I'm looking to see is CrowdStrike on the device and a minimum zero trust score, which we won't get into why they're overusing the term, but now I'm actually doing real asset management, and now I'm actually saying, give me an inventory of all these things that do touch my data and what can happen. As I look towards isolated browsers that say, all right, fine, I've stopped caring about the whole device, I'm only going to use this isolated browser session. Well, that gives me a better context than saying, I have 500 devices, 10,000 devices. Yeah, you have millions of devices if everything can get access to it. That's my opinion at least.
Yeah. So talk about, there's zero trust as it currently is. There is zero trust of the future, which I have to believe is something that you spend a lot of your waking hours thinking about.
Someone asked me...
Paint a picture of that future.
Someone asked me earlier today, where do you see your company in 5 years? And I said, I don't like answering that question because the things that existed 5 years ago, no one thought they were going to happen, much less what's now coming out there. And so I think the same thing is what I struggle with on zero trust of the future is we won't start keeping the idea of employee or corporate-owned devices. We'll start thinking of ways that every device could be just-in-time provision like Imprivata's doing and others. We'll start thinking of how do I truly maintain my data posture and what's going on. There's other pieces that'll sort of crack things apart. I was talking to a group the other day, air gap, that when you're on the corporate network, everything is a /32. Nothing naturally talks to anything else, similar to how a cellular network works. Now, air gap's been around for a minute, but this idea that I just show up and I can start talking to other things starts disappearing. How do I close that off? There's so many bright minds that are saying, how do I take all these next pieces? I was talking to a group that, in the DSPM space, and they're truly tackling the ability to say, let me scan your file shares, your SQL databases that are on-prem, not forget about those, plus what's in your cloud assets, but they don't hold any of the data. You're using basically a Lambda function to be able to do all of that in the VM. They're only holding pieces of metadata to say, yes, this was a real piece of what we found, and here are all the people that have access to this sensitive data. So I think that what's going to change in how we see the world will start more on that data piece, but we'll also keep in context of all the users and devices that data piece can talk to. Because right now we've spent too much time on ZTNA, we've spent too much time in those other areas. How do we get back to what's most important, and that's the data?
Yep. So talk about how your organization is trying to help get other organizations to that point.
So Ridge has been around 10 years. The other founder and I have been working together for over 20 years. And we started out in the government space. And we worked with an org that said, hey, we want to get rid of having tons of point solutions. We want to simplify the ecosystem. We want to be able to make it almost SaaS or managed services based for everything. And I thought she was crazy when she asked us to do this. And we really said, all right, we can actually evaluate the needs for compliance and the needs for security and say, hey, this is possible now. And 5 years ago, I really didn't see it. But today, Ridge really understands all the products they represent, and we're able to truly offer those services, not just say, hey, I can pass paper, maybe the vendor can do it. So if you buy CrowdStrike or Microsoft from us or Qualys even, we truly can do all of the tier 2, tier 3 support that's needed, and we're not here to close a ticket, we're here to understand the bigger picture. So as we sit down with our customers and say, hey, what are you trying to accomplish? What is the reason you're buying this? Not what does the PDF say that you want this? What is the actual end goal? Because everybody's got something different. How do we meet that? Some people are going after CMMC compliance, not necessarily zero trust. Some people are going on other pieces. Our goal is to say, all right, how do we work together? And that work together thought process means when a customer says, hey, I'm battling this problem, sometimes we quickly realize the issue that you're having isn't related to Zscaler, it's actually related over here to Okta or Microsoft, but one of the senior engineers can get together, collaborate with the customer and say, here's how we come together on solving that solution. And I think the other big thing that we look towards is so many people out there saying they do cloud-based services, but they're really just taking their on-premise networking knowledge and they're going to put that in the cloud. Well, that's not how cloud was designed. You're missing out the functions. There's some great Dilbert cartoons that I absolutely love on this matter, and Dilbert nailed it. But when we say, all right, let's actually look at a cloud-first approach and let's look for where these services can matter, there's cost savings that can be achieved versus these huge compliance, but we can also say, hey, I can do things that scale faster and do better. And there's a reason that cloud is winning faster at the zero trust game than the appliance architecture, in my opinion, that exists. I was working with a group the other day that's truly an MSSP that works in a very technical space, but they're having to outsource to us to say, hey, how do we actually make things better and faster? How do we use resources to get into there?
So we are out of time. I could keep talking about this for like another hour.
Or 10 days.
This is great. Yeah, no. But this has been very helpful. I think our audience will take some valuable lessons. So thanks for being here, Trace.
Thank you so much for your time, Bill.
And yeah, have a good week.
You too, sir. Stop by our booth.
I surely will. Thanks.